Hi there, my name is Cari Patterson and I'm the Evaluation and Learning Lead at Nova Scotia. I'm going to be sharing some data that start to tell the story of digital inclusion in Nova Scotia and definitely welcome insights, thoughts, perspectives from others who can help us deepen our shared understanding of the story of digital inclusion in the province. I also just want to say that this is a re-recording of the presentation that I originally made at the conference. We had some major technical glitches and you're going to be able to enjoy the conversation without those glitches. Thank a couple people who have been involved in the presentation. So Thomas Storring is the Director of Statistics and Economics for the Department of Finance. His comments woven throughout the presentation. Also Meg Beretta, who's a Digital Associate at Davis Pier and the former Director of Digital Strategy at the Department of Cybersecurity and Digital Solutions. So thank you to both of them. And I thank Kamal Carr at Geo, who helped with the data analysis for this presentation. These are the topics we'll be covering in the presentation. So we're going to talk about internet coverage, access and use, mobile coverage and access, and we don't have much on use of mobiles. And we're going to talk about affordability, a little bit about what Geo does, digital skills, and then look at what's the current state of digital inclusion in the province. So first, let's agree on what digital inclusion means. From Nova Scotia's perspective, digital inclusion has three components, and that means that everyone in Nova Scotia has affordable access to the internet, an affordable device to get online, and the basic skills and competence that they need to be online. And why is digital inclusion important? It provides economic opportunities like online job opportunities and resources, e-commerce, digital entrepreneurship, increased productivity and efficiency for businesses. Digital inclusion also provides educational and lifelong learning. So people have access to educational resources and courses, they can take remote learning opportunities, they can develop digital skills for a competitive workforce. Digital inclusion also provides health care and wellness. So things like telehealth, virtual health care, remote health care services, access to health information and resources, and support groups and communities online. Digital inclusion also provides civic engagement and social connection. So people participate in democratic processes online, and they have access to government services and information, and they can stay connected with family and friends. So this means there's reduced inequality and reduced social exclusion. So that can help bridge the gap between those with and without internet access, and ensures equal opportunities for all Nova Scotians. So the information in this presentation came from a few different sources. The main one is the Canadian Internet Use Survey, which was last done in 2022. It measures the adoption and use of digital technologies by people over 15 years old who live in the provinces in Canada. The source was the Strategic Council, which identifies trends in Canadian internet use to support the Canadian Internet Registration Authority. Made in CA is an organization that compiles data to support Canadian small businesses, and we drew on one of their resources. Then we also drew on our own resources at Geo. We have data about our programs, including demographic information about our participants, the kind of devices and connections we distribute, and the impacts of our work. Okay, so let's talk about internet coverage in Nova Scotia first. And did you know that Canada has one of the fastest internet networks in the world? It's 150 megabytes per second. Now, Build Nova Scotia is the corporation that implements the policy objectives and priorities of the provincial government in relation to strategic infrastructure, and they're responsible for the Internet Nova Scotia initiative. So when they started trying to get coverage across the province, there were about only 75% of people in Nova Scotia had access. There were about 103,000 homes and businesses that served by internet access. Now, approximately 99,500 homes and businesses have access to high-speed internet through the project. This is approximately 99% coverage and approximately 99.9% with the satellite rebate option that they offer. Who has access to the internet? In 2018, So there were 7.5%, or about 71,000 Nova Scotians who reported not having access to home internet. In 2022, that increased to 9.6%, or about 83,000 of Nova Scotians reported that they didn't have access to home internet. So of those folks that didn't have access to home, that reported not having access to home internet, 30% of them said that the cost of internet services was the reason they don't have it, and almost a quarter of them said that the cost of equipment was the reason that they didn't have home internet. Now, of the approximately 83,000 Nova Scotians who don't have a high-speed internet connection at home, they were asked the reason for it. So you can see that over half, 58.4%, said they have no interest or need for internet. So of course we have to wonder, do they understand the potential benefits of internet? And nearly a third of the folks who don't have access to who don't have a high-speed internet connection said it was due to the cost of service, as I've just said. And we also have to acknowledge that it could be due to lack of income and competing need for money for other necessities. So almost a quarter said it was due to the cost of equipment, and almost a quarter said it was due to the limitation of use due to a disability. And there's a few other reasons cited here. Okay, now we're going to hear from...
My name is Beretta. My pronouns are she, her. I am a digital associate at Pier Consulting, and I've also in the past been a researcher on government and policy in Canada, and I'm an advocate for greater civic education and digital literacy in Canada. So I think there's some ways that we could really build up the robustness of our data to make sure that we're capturing the people we need to and getting to the bottom of some of those same data points. So one of them is that we have in there is showing what that there's a group of the non-internet users, 50% of you who don't want to use the internet. Absolutely a legitimate choice, and we need to respect that. But there's people within that group who might also may not still know what they could be offered by having access to the internet, right? Yeah. So there's some opportunities there where we need to get deeper into that data, understand more of the challenges in our own communities, and be a kind of offer services that help people get what they need as well.
Thanks, Meg.
My name is...
It's a very well-connected country. There are some groups where access to the internet is lower than average. According to Maiden CA, one of these groups is seniors, especially people who are 75 years of age or older. In 2020, only 62% of people in this group were connected or had used the internet. Other groups with a lower than average access to the internet include people with a disability. This is Canada-wide. People with a disability, Canadians who are unemployed, Indigenous peoples, and Indigenous peoples. Family households are more likely to use the internet compared to single-person households. So we took a look at the demographics of people in Nova Scotia who have neither home internet access nor mobile data for any of the reasons that they might have listed. And we found, you can see on this slide that are 25 to 64 years old, and 77.7% are 65 or over. %7% live in single-person households, and only 1.7% live in households with children. So people in households with children, as we said, are more likely to have internet access. 56.2% are female, 43.8% are male, 15.2% are currently employed. Over a quarter live with a disability. 65.2% live in large urban areas. The rest live in rural areas or small towns. And smaller portions identify as Indigenous or visible minorities. Now we're going to hear from Thomas.
I'm Thomas Storring. I'm the Director of Economics and Statistics at the Nova Scotia Department of Finance and Treasury Board. One of the things that leapt out at me from the presentation, one is that there appears to be a clear generational difference here. Younger Nova Scotians, and by that I mean just anybody under 6'5", pretty much appears to have either grown up with the technology it fairly readily at midlife, and this is a generation that grew up performing all of the functions that you mentioned, getting entertainment, seeking work, using technologies that exist online. So there's not really as much of a barrier for them as long as they have the means and the location to be able to get online. They're doing it. They see the value in it. What I was quite struck by was the difference for those who are over 65, and the prevalence of use of internet is considerably lower for older Nova Scotians. And this is an intuitive conclusion, but you could surmise that this is a generation that grew up performing lots of those functions, work, entertainment, without this technology, and they're quite used to getting by with it. And so for them, they may not perceive the value that they could be getting from this technology. Gainsay their choices here. There are some opportunities by demonstrating to an older generation the values and benefits that they could get from getting online.
Thanks, Thomas. Now, okay, so we talked about coverage being across most of Nova Scotia at this point. We've talked about access and who has access and who doesn't have access. Now let's look at internet use in the province, how people are using it. So we know that about 90% of Nova Scotians have home internet access. Now let's look at where they use the internet. So you can see from this slide that most people use the internet from home. Almost a half use it from work. Almost 40% use it from someone else's home, and almost a quarter use it from another public location or business establishment, and lower numbers use it from schools, public libraries, and others. You can see that, interestingly, 7% of Nova Scotians use the internet at public libraries. Now this slide shows about working at home. So you can see that nearly half of Nova Scotians work at least some of their hours from home. 14.4% work less than a quarter of their hours from home, up to the same number of Nova Scotians who work all of their hours from home, interestingly. Half of Nova Scotians don't work any of their hours from home. Here you can see that about a third of Nova Scotians at home are expected to stay connected by their employer, and a third have an internet-connected device provided by their employer. Now I think we're going to Thomas again.
That I saw in the data that struck me was around the percentage of the population that are in whole or in part working from home. And I think we want to be careful drawing conclusions now from that data, just because I think the labor market is shifting. Employers, even those who have the possibility of having their teams work from home, are choosing to require on-site presence for their staff. So I think we need to examine whether work from home is truly a durable trend, or whether it's something that is going to fade or revert back to an older way. I will say I see that the possibility of working from home offers a lot of opportunity and flexibility.
Thank you, Thomas. Now, so this slide shows what people are using the internet for, excluding work and school. The top uses are banking, booking appointments, and playing video games. And these data are pretty consistent with what GEO participants tell us about how they use the internet, although the top way people using the internet is increased connection with family and friends. So I wanted to just give a couple of examples of people benefit from using the internet. So the story of appointments. So a senior husband had missed out on 4 months of needed health tests. They didn't have the technology or the skills to book their appointments online, and they couldn't schedule the tests in person until they saw their doctor, which of course there was some wait before they could do that. So once they had a device, an internet connection, and some training, they were able to engage to manage their bookings for health tests and get the care they needed in a timely way. There's also a story of a man who was in a car accident which left him with a severe brain injury. He is living and getting used to a new way of life, but he hasn't been able to talk and was feeling very isolated. Gio's partner provided him with a Chromebook, and using his Chromebook, he can now speak to his friends via text-to-speech in a group home where he's living. There's other. Okay, now we've been talking about internet. We're going to look at mobile coverage and where mobile service is available in Nova Scotia. And the reason we're talking about this is because we know a lot of people access the internet on mobiles. And just this past summer, after pilot testing Gio Mobile, Gio now offers smartphones with data plans as an option for anyone who are connecting through our referral partners. According to Build Nova Scotia, the same organization that's responsible for the internet coverage in Nova Scotia, there are approximately 20,000 civic addresses and 1,000 kilometers of primary roads without mobile service. And there are areas of the province that lack adequate and consistent cellular coverage, which poses a challenge to public safety and seamless communication. So you can see here that province-wide coverage ranges from 46 to 69%, and the number of civic addresses served across the province ranges from 84 to 95%, and only 64 to 86% of primary roads have cellular service. So here we can see the objectives Build Nova Scotia is trying to achieve by spring 2027 in terms of mobile coverage for the province. The idea is to have 99% coverage for clear audio calls, 95% coverage for audio calls or video transmission, for emails, internet browsing, and social media. And they're hoping to have 85% coverage for high quality audio, video transmission for emails, internet browsing, social media, also video conferencing and movie streaming. So let's look at who has access to mobile service. 80.3% of people in Nova Scotia have access to the internet through a mobile data plan. Of the 19.7% who don't have access to a mobile data plan, a third of them also don't have home internet. So there's about almost 60,000 people who are connected neither by home internet nor mobile. And I just wanted a story of just how mobile use is important. So this is a story from Gio about a woman who had to pack up all her belongings and escape an abusive marriage. She had to leave her son with her mother and had no way of contacting them when she arrived in Nova Scotia from another province. So when she got here, she visited one of Gio's referral partners for support, and they told her about Gio Connects. So Gio provided her with a device and arranged for the internet, and now she could contact her family back home. She had felt very isolated, and she was very joyful that now she could have this family connection while she tried to rebuild her life at such a difficult time. And she said she no longer felt isolated and alone. So we've looked at mobile coverage and access a little bit. We're not going to look at mobile use because we don't have information on that yet. But let's look at some about affordability. So we'll look at the cost of internet in Canada, poverty rates in Nova Scotia, and the kinds of things people are doing without so they can pay for the internet. Canada has one of the most expensive internet services in the world. So in 2019, the average cost for 100 megabytes per second in Canada was $81.70, $114 in South Africa, and under $8 in Ukraine. All these prices are in Canadian dollars. Now this slide shows data about poverty in Nova Scotia, and it uses the market basket measure. So the market basket measure estimates the share of the population that don't have sufficient income to be able to afford a basket of essential goods and services. Using this measure, we can see that Nova Scotia has the highest poverty rate of all provinces in Canada, about 130,000 people. The groups of people living below the market basket measure poverty line in Nova Scotia are notably similar to the folks who don't have internet access. So economic families, a group of 2 or more people living in the same household and related in some way. The number of families with children who are living in poverty is the 3rd highest percentage among all provinces. A third of lone parent families live in poverty, which is well above the national level of 22.6%. The majority of those living in poverty in Nova Scotia are 18 to 64 years old. And Nova Scotia has the highest poverty rate among all provinces at 14%. It also has the highest poverty rate of seniors in all provinces, especially seniors who don't live in economic families. And Nova Scotia has the highest rate of poverty among females of all the provinces. So you can notice that the people who don't have internet access have a lot in common, characteristic-wise, with the folks who are living in poverty. So this slide shows where people are cutting spending in order to pay for the internet. You can see that people are cutting back on dining out, entertainment, clothing, travel, groceries, transportation, even prescriptions and medicines. And more Nova Scotians are making cuts in all categories than Canadians as a whole. So something we have to consider here is the fact that some people who are paying for the internet can't necessarily afford it. They may be doing without other things in order to pay for the internet. And now, going to hear.
You've touched on it quite well. We've examined, your presentation examines some of the barriers that exist, and I think we need to group them into specific barriers that are specific to getting online, whether that is the cost of the service, whether that is whether the location has access to good service, whether there is the literacy to be able to use the tools to get online. But I think there are also general barriers, and you touched on this when you went through quite well the data, looking at income and other costs. If households have limited incomes, it may be possible that internet access is something that they have to sacrifice in order to be able to afford more pressing needs, shelter, transportation, food. And so part of the approach to getting people online may be addressing those broader pressures and purchasing power pressures, removing barriers to affording things in general, also improve the ability of households to.
Thank you, Thomas. And now we're going to hear again from.
You've touched.
This data is really showing that internet access is less of a connectivity issue in Nova Scotia due to some of the great efforts to kind of get more connectivity in the province, and now more of a cost issue and an equity issue based on the other influences in people's lives. So I think we know now that those with lower internet connectivity continue to have barriers to access in other parts of their life as well. And they're also the people who might benefit the most from greater access. So we're now seeing this as an equity issue across other lines of disability, race, and region, where it's creating kind of greater equity issues on top of that. And that cost is really going to be this issue as we are in silent recession, that people are going to have to deal with the fact that their costs around them are all rising, and maybe making a choice as to whether they have access to the internet or not as part of their costs.
Thank you, Meg.
Well, I think that this data is really
Okay, so I want to talk for a minute about GeoConnects, and I also want to look at the devices that people who have access are using to get online, and I'm going to talk about the number of devices Geo is distributing through our referral partners. So Nova Scotians use several different devices to access the internet, mostly desktops or laptop computers, smartphones or mobiles, and then a much smaller number use tablets, TVs, other devices like Alexa, and smartwatches. So just over a quarter of Nova Scotians access the internet using one device only, and nearly 3/4 use it accessing more than one device. And this slide shows the the work GEO has been doing to with referral partners to get people online. So since 2022, GEO and our referral partners have supported over 9,000 people in over 4,000 households, 5,700 adults, and 3,400 youth. And together we've distributed 4,180 devices and 2,500 internet connections. So we've talked about internet coverage and use, access and use, mobile coverage access, affordability, and what GEO is doing. Let's talk about essential digital skills. So a quarter of Nova Scotians improve their digital skills through self-guided learning, and about get help from family or friends to improve their skills. Only about a tenth learn through paid training by their employers, and fewer learn in other ways. And interestingly, you can see here that over half of Nova Scotians don't engage in any kind of learning to improve their digital skills. Hear from.
I also am interested in is that 55% of people are not learning new digital skills. So I'm interested in how much people are acquiring skills to just do the job that they have, for example, or just do the thing with school that they have, whatever that task might be, and how that might not mean that they're skill ready for the next job. How do we bridge those gaps? How do we ensure that people are not just they're actually staying current and aren't playing catch up every time they want to make a shift in their lives? If you suddenly find yourself without a job, and not only do you have to find a new job, but you also have to find the time and money and skills to make sure you have the skills for that job, that really puts you at another disadvantage. So how are we creating environments and workplaces that are helping build people's skills or complementing that from the social sector to make sure those skills exist as well? Also, how are we telling people skills they need to have for the next generation of jobs? Not even the next generation, the kind of just next job for them. How do we make sure that there's kind of a core understanding and core subset of work there?
Thanks, Meg. So we know that there are actually a number of organizations and initiatives in Nova Scotia who are actively working to address digital literacy and skill gaps. This slide gives a feel for the kinds of digital literacy training that's being offered by various organizations. And also, it's not a comprehensive table, we know that. And there are certainly programs and initiatives we're not aware of yet. So if you know of something, we'd love to hear about it if you don't see it on here, or if you just want to tell us about it. So we know that organizations are offering technical training, basic digital literacy, some community-specific programs, skills programs. Some are offering access to technology, and some are offering employment-focused programs. But as I said, this is just an initial picture of the kinds of skills people are offering. We don't know what the skill levels are of the people who are taking the training. That would be an interesting thing for us to find out more about. GEO is doing, and again, GEO is one of many organizations offering digital skills training. So we're offering digital champion training to our referral partners. So that supports them in their efforts to help their program participants gain digital skills. So this slide shows that since June 2023, when our digital champions training started, GEO has offered 31 training sessions and 182 people have participated, and they're all supporting other people. Okay, so finally I want to talk about the current state of digital inclusion in Nova Scotia. It's mixed. On one hand, Nova Scotia has high internet access and use rates overall. There are collaborative efforts building among various sectors to provide devices, connection, and accessible training and resources. And the provincial government is investing in infrastructure, including broadband, mobile, and getting devices and access to people who are living on low incomes. On the other hand, there are some challenges. So pockets of the population still face barriers to digital participation because of things like income, where their geographic location, their education level, and their age. Affordability of internet access and devices remains a significant issue for many, particularly in rural areas. And there's a need for ongoing efforts to ensure digital literacy programs reach and effectively serve all communities, including newcomers, seniors, individuals with disabilities, and folks who are Indigenous. So Nova Scotia has made strides in promoting digital inclusion, but work remains to ensure that all residents have access, skills, and confidence to fully participate in the digital world. And a continued investment in infrastructure, affordability programs, and targeted digital literacy initiatives will be crucial to bridge the remaining gaps and create a province that's truly digitally inclusive. So this is the juicy part where we think about the questions that the data raised for us. So you can see some questions on the slide about whose voices are included and not included in this story of the data about digital inclusion. How do we know what digital skills people have and need? Digital skill building is ongoing, and people who don't need it today might need it tomorrow when something new comes along. What are effective ways to build people's digital skills? And at GEO, we think a lot about this one, how to measure the impact digital inclusion is having on people's lives and on communities, and how do we measure it at a level that we can act on? So how can we assess what people need to be online? If digital inclusion is indeed a super social determinant of health, as an article in Nature 2021, can we engage the system? For example, health, education, and community services in talking with people about what they need and whether they are digitally included. Could we create something like community counts to store and share this kind of information about Nova Scotia? So let's hear first of all, from Meg.
I'll say I see that the possibility of working from home offers a lot of...
So let's hear first of all from Thomas on this.
I'll say I see that the possibility of working from home offers a lot of opportunity and flexibility, particularly in places like rural Nova Scotia. And one of the things that in my examination of the data is that Nova Scotia tends to have a very low population of dual earning couples where there's a single earner and a fairly low population of dual earning couples, particularly in rural areas. And again, intuitively, this makes sense. It may be easy for one member of a couple to find and appropriate employment, and another member of a couple may not be able to in a rural area where the job market just simply isn't as deep or broad. From home offers the possibility of finding that kind of productivity, higher paid work. Sure that there is access for people in rural areas opens up that possibility and has the potential to significantly incomes for couple families in areas. So that I'll say I see that the possibility of...
And now let's hear from Meg again with her thoughts on this.
So one of the things that I'm curious about is how we start to ensure that governments, not-for-profits, even social workers in the wider world of supporting people are checking in on internet access and inclusion as part of their work, as part of their measures of well-being with their clients or the people that they serve, and where that access is coming from and what resources they have in the world of internet access. Some things I think I'd like to see from this is more regional data for Nova Scotia. I'd like to know a little bit more about where people are using internet in different ways, working from home or using it on the job and in school. I'd like to know how that's happening across the province. I'd also love to see more drill down on digital skills per industry so that we can start providing that data to organizations who might need to add this to part of their mandate, ensure that people are job ready, workforce ready, and education ready across the spectrum of different kind of industries and regions in the province. And I think also some of our traditional ways of measuring skills don't always apply to digital skills. Also, the places that people take surveys might be online where if they're already on that platform and then measuring their own digital skills, it might not be the best use. In Canada in general, we have fairly weak research on internet use, and though the Canadian Internet Use Survey is fantastic, we have fairly limited people taking in data around this. We don't have as much of a robust internet research field in Canada. We have some great researchers, but for example, in the UK, they have a fabulous survey that's one of the most in-depth in the world, where they truly go into people's homes, which is not a way that we do a lot of research anymore. It's certainly large-scale quantitative research, but it's one of the most robust, and it's really helped the UK understand their scenarios better and really improve their understanding, and then their programs that they've created to help bridge those gaps around digital equity and inclusion. There's been great strides in providing greater access to healthcare digitally. However, there's a gap with those who might need that the most, whether it's in rural or remote areas. Those who might not have great access to both healthcare might also not have great access to either the internet or the skills to access these services. I know there's a large learning curve, even for those who are digitally literate, on some of these new ways of interacting with someone like a physician or a nurse practitioner. So there's some interesting opportunities for us to think about all of these new programs that are coming out to help fill our gaps there, and how we need to match those with the right skills, access, and locations where maybe we provide some hybrid access. There's been some programs to help bridge those gaps, provide people private locations to take video calls with healthcare in libraries, for example. So how are we kind of creating the gaps that might, or how are we creating the bridges that might fill those gaps between new programs that are coming out and the people who need to access those programs the most? There's one around, there's close to 30% of people having internet on one device only. We can make some assumptions that that's likely a cell phone for many people. So cell phones really change access and really grow that access. We're also seeing cheaper data plans, which really can be a boon for folks who don't have home internet access. But they're also a limited device. And, as we all know, we've tried to do something maybe a little more complex than a smartphone can do. It's hard to format a resume on a phone, for example. So I'd like to know a little bit more about how people are using cell phones to fill gaps in their digital lives. I'd also love to see more demographics around who is using cell phones versus kind of home computers. My guess is it would be a younger cohort, and a cohort who might live in more poverty. But I'd be really interested to find out a bit more about that and how they're kind of creating the environment that they need to succeed by kind of linking all of these pieces together. Those skills exist as well. Also, how are we telling people what skills they need to have for the next generation of jobs? And not even the next generation, the kind of just next job for them. How to make sure that there's kind of a core understanding and core subset of work there. Yeah, I think that's a real challenge that we're going to have for people, and we're struggling. We have a difficult job market right now, and this is kind of a place that perhaps there's an opportunity for GEO to help and other groups in Nova Scotia to help make that job search a little bit easier for people.
Great, thank you, Meg.
So one of the things.
The beginning of the story of digital inclusion in Nova Scotia, and we look forward to hearing from everyone else and about your thoughts on the story and what are the other kinds of information we need to collect in order to be able to better understand the story. I just want to mention also there was a question about whether mobile devices could help people who are homeless in rural communities access jobs. And I didn't answer that question in the original presentation as well as I could have. So I'd like to say here that having a mobile phone may offer some stability for some people. It gives it a permanent contact, which makes it easier to connect with, support people in community organizations, stay in touch with family and friends, and access job information. And as we said at the time, there are lots of factors to consider as well, but it may be helpful in some of those ways. I'd love to have a discussion with the person who asked the question or others who have thoughts on this. So we look forward to continuing the discussion very much, and thank you for listening and participating in this presentation.